Curselock LitRPG Curse Magic Adventure. By Left Right. Synopsis. After a childhood of watching his parents grow famous through their use of magic, Leland wanted nothing more than to follow along in their shadows. But an opportunity for something far beyond simple renown was dangled before his very eyes. The only issue was that the opportunity had dark connotations. Follow Leland and his two best friends as they adventure through backwood villages and towns, helping those in need all the while growing their names and abilities. Along the way they will make friends and enemies alike, along with a few crazy stalkers or manipulative nobles. Curselock is a lit RPG focused around a curse magic user and his two friends, a berserker and rogue. The story starts with the trio first unlocking their newfound livelihoods and their adventures that inevitably follow. Monsters, dungeons, cults, nothing will stand in their path to achieving their lifelong goals. Chapter 1, Cake and Steak. The lights in the small atrium dimmed, casting a long shadow across the sparse audience while isolating the stage with importance. Soon a humorously dressed man stepped from behind the curtain, along with a trail of various breeds of dogs. Some were big, others small, but they all had one thing in common. They did not have fur, they were not fluffy. They were radiating bright orange light, along with the heat of a boiler room, much to the displeasure of the wood grain flooring. Their steps left black char, something their owner didn't give a second glance. These dogs began to jump through hoops and climb each other to form pyramids. The show was rather boring, when it came down to it. Leland had seen countless similar traveling acts pass through his city, most of which he didn't care to see anymore. Not since he was a kid, at least. But for some reason, he always felt magnetized to the more magical theatrics. The ones like this show he was currently watching. The one with the dogs made of flame and the spellcaster that didn't mind ruining the floors. There was showmanship in maintaining so many spells, Leland mused. But still, he knew the trick and frankly wasn't impressed by the caster's hand. He had seen his parents recreate the same show many times during his nearly 19 years of life, often with much smaller or more exotic animals. Still, there was something magical about magic, something that drew Leland into the same rundown rotting atrium time and time again. Magic had been his dream since he could remember, one that sprouted long nights of studying and countless sleepless nights dreaming of his first spell. The dogs suddenly imploded into countless fireflies before the swarm fluttered through the open air, drifting into dance. Nearby an accompanying flutist began a fast-paced rhythmic tone, one that mimicked the highs and lows of the fireflies' act. Leland found himself enthralled at the show, the song making his spine sway like wheat against a gentle breeze. It took his mind a moment to catch up, no doubt the flutist's legacy ability aiding in his stupor. He looked to the musician to find her giving him a sly wink before her song abruptly cut off and the clapping began. Clapping along with the other families, Leland suddenly felt naked. The fireflies and song, while impressive, were also quite invasive. Not in the sense that his mind felt like it was slipping into captivation, but because it reminded him of what he was missing. His family. They were off saving the world at the Queen's orders, something Leland understood quite well. But still, it hurt sometimes. Especially when it came to seeing magic like those fireflies, especially when it came to seeing magic that made him feel like a child again. The dogs were nothing when compared to the fireflies, Leland thought, smiling at a young child and her parents reaching for one of the few remaining sparkles floating in the air. The flutist made her rounds through the crowd, thrusting a deep hat out to all patrons. Slipping 10 dull and dented silver coins into the hat, Leland quickly found his way out of the atrium and back to his route home. Along the way he stopped to get dinner and to simply enjoy the nightlife of his small town. It potentially was his last, so he made sure to savor it. Entering the restaurant, Leland was ambushed by a sudden pop and fleeting cheer from a table in the corner. 2 rolls of streamers rushed through the air toward him, casting their colorful string in their trajectory's wake. Finding himself flushed with embarrassment, Leland quickly pulled the streamers off of his head and rushed over to the table. He sat down with a curse, hiding his face from the gleeful smirks of those not drunk enough to notice the commotion. Almost on cue, a bard began chanting the low syllables of the song Happy Birthday. Leland sunk into himself even more, despite the loud boisterous laugh and muted chuckle from his two best friends. Pretty soon the restaurant's staff and a few customers began to sing along with the bard. As to not be excluded or outdone, Jude and Glennie, Leland's two friends, added their own voices to the mix. The song went on for what felt like an eternity, one Leland desperately wished he could find some way out of. Still, he found himself smiling despite the attention and embarrassment. As the song finished, a large slice of cake was placed before his slouching frame, one covered in sugary berries and plenty of whipped cream. A quick round of applause echoed through the small restaurant along with multiple bows from the bard. Leland's table all gave a nod to the charismatic singer, who responded with a cheeky smile. Then, cake. So, Leals, Leland giggled at Jude's trepidation and pushed the plate to the center of the table. Jude and Glennie eyed each other, the cake, and Leland, then, like a dam breaking, they launched an assault on the plate. This made Leland laugh again before his eyes narrowed at the lost ground. He thrust his fork into the cake, taking a heaping chunk and the accompanying sweet sticky berry sauce before the entire slice was gone. In the end, the waiter had to bring out 3 more slices to feed the starving boys, along with their entrees of chicken and various cuts of steak. And vegetables, couldn't forget about those. Happy birthday, Leland, Glennie said, his cheeks puffed like a chipmunk's. Jude forced himself to swallow his bite of food. Right, happy birthday. Leland smiled at them. Thanks guys, but that's not until tomorrow. We know, Glennie continued. We just wanted to say it now in case tomorrow is too hectic. Their private seating was abruptly invaded by a crow. It fluttered down to their table, bypassing the open window and perching directly on the spine of an empty chair. Jude tried to shoo it off, but the bird simply hopped out of his reach and caught at him. Glennie flicked at a stripped chicken leg, but the crow simply ignored it. Instead, it stared at Leland for a long moment before taking off back to the outside air. Birds are cool, Leland said plainly. If you say so, Glennie mused, cutting into a hunk of meat. What were we talking about? Oh, right, tomorrow. Nodding, Leland whispered in a spooky tone, the dream ceremony. Jude frowned at that. It's not that ominous. During mine, I was served a huge mug of ale and danced around with the Lord of Berserkers and his entourage. At least, until it came down to accepting his legacy. At that point I was pretty drunk though. Leland and Glennie stared at their friend incredulously. Mine, Glennie spoke up, was calm and collected. Lasted all of 5 minutes. But you knew that you were going to accept your lord right away, Leland said. That's true, but that's the same with you, right? Lord of Magic? Just like your parent. Glennie was cut off at the reappearance of the crow. This time, however, it dive-bombed onto their table, snatching a hunk of lamb right from the rack. Jude cursed at the bird, chasing it out with just his hurtful words. Yeah, Leland finally said. I can't wait if I'm being honest. Jude downed the last few gulps of his drink then slammed his mug down. Then what are you waiting for? Get home and get to bed. Can't have a dream ceremony without falling asleep. Glennie nodded in agreement to the statement and suddenly Leland found both his friends waiting for an answer. He smirked, and leave this feast to you beasts? Not a chance. At that, the 3 clinked their mugs and ordered another round of food and mead. In the end, the boys each had their fill along with a lengthy bill. A few gold later, they were on the streets passing the nightlife with a sway in their step. Glennie's house was first, and the young man bid his friends a farewell. Next was Jude, offering to spend the night at Leland's to make sure nightmares didn't get in the way of the dream ceremony. Leland laughed at the proclamation, pushing his friend into his home. Then it was just Leland and the walk home. He took it slow, the buzzing in his stomach hindering his steps. This was his dream, right? To finally come of age and accept a lord and accompanying legacy. All he needed was to fall asleep, something that he knew wasn't possible right now. So, he lay awake, staring at his ceiling as a plethora of emotions bubbled through his brain and belly. At some point, however, the bubbling became real and he found himself puking up dinner. A few minutes and a rainstorm of cold sweat later, Leland finally closed his eyes, allowing the void of sleep to take him. A ruffling from behind drew Leland's attention. He turned, suddenly finding an ocean of trees sprouting before his very eyes. Chapter 2, Dream Ceremony. Leland's face crooked into a deep smile, one that pulled his cheeks to their highest arc movement quickly pulled his gaze, and he found an ebony crow staring at him with huge amethyst eyes. It tilted its head, inspecting the human while silently conveying its unhappiness. The crow, as small as it was, held the presence of a god. It looked at Leland with the ego of the heavens, the arrogance of a lord. It cawed once, booming its power across the darkened landscape from one horizon to the other. The spindly trees vibrated from the sudden earthquake, uprooting before being consumed by their dirt housings. The forest fell apart, transforming into a barren wasteland of undeath and ruin. Groans echoed from the marshy floor as sickly green hands sprouted into life. At first the hands waved around like a crowd cheering for a performance, but they eventually grew enough to pull their bodies from the soil. Souls, hundreds, one for each tree, groaned and moaned, each transfixed on Leland. They tracked him, not that he was moving but rather because they were forced to. Their bodies didn't sit idle, they twisted and contorted, like their ghostly muscles were cramping. Humph! Leland turned back to the crow. It still sat on an isolated tree, but this tree had grown. Bone and antler spiraled around the open air, creating branches and life. Sparkling puffs of magic bloomed along the branches, each whispering their power words like budding flowers. Reds, greens, deep blues, even a few marbled black and white spells, were within the tree. It was Leland's tree, he knew, but not for another day, or maybe not. Was it this it? He couldn't remember, had he gone to bed yet? He smiled again. The legacy of the Lord of Curses, the crow spoke in a harsh voice, like it was screaming and whispering at the same time. You accept, don't you? There it was. Leland had fallen asleep, it was finally his birthday. 19. He couldn't believe it, he was finally of age to become someone new, something worthwhile. It was finally time to accept his legacy, years he had waited for this moment. The legacy of the... Wait. Lord of Curses? Leland asked, his mind reeling back into reality, or rather, to the dream ceremony. Seriously? The crow tilted its head before cawing once. The landscape shifted back to the spiny forest, souls of the damned disappearing back into the ground. Only the massive bone tree remained, along with the spells of the Curse Lord. What do you mean, seriously? The crow asked, its voice fading from harsh to disbelief. Leland frowned. Well, I mean, Mom and Dad were legacies of the Magic Lord. I figured I would be the same. I had it all planned out. First I'd learn water magic, maybe a simple healing spell, then progress into lightning. The combination would be rather effect. Stop, the crow ordered. It sighed, bringing forth a large wind. The trees shook, even Leland stumbled a bit. Did I do something? No, no. The crow hopped to a different branch, turning its back away from the human. It's just the natural reaction every one of my legacy has. It's me, right? Before Leland could respond, the crow continued. Try to intimidate potential legacies. I was urged to do. Make them fear my power, so that they feel the touch of greed upon their minds. The crow turned to the open air, cawing a muted curse before a drop of liquid fell from its amethyst eye. Leland's face scrunched. Are you crying? No. The force of the word stripped the land of all things, besides the tree with the spells on its branches, of course. Leland suddenly found the situation uncomfortable. He struggled to stand still, his legs pushing him to console the saddened lord. He walked over to the tree, putting his hand on the bony trunk. "You don't have to cry," he said. "There has to be someone who will accept your legacy, right?" For a moment the crow glanced at him before turning back away. "No. They are all snatched up by the magic lord before I have a chance. It's rare I get the first petition for the magically inclined. Even rarer that they accept my offer." Leland paused. "Why did you get first petition over me then?" The crow huffed. "A relative on your mother's side was a legacy of mine some 2,000 years ago. When the gift of magic appears in your bloodline, or any of my other patrons, I have right of the first. So, my mother declined your offer then? She's a powerful mage, she must have the gift of magic or whatever. Why wouldn't she tell me about this?" Now the crow looked back at him, its eyes glinting in shame. "No, she didn't have the gift. It goes beyond simply being able to use magic like any common mage. Curses take a sophisticated hand, much more than casting fireballs." That caught Leland's attention. "Does it now? Can you explain?" The crow ruffled a wing. "The potency differs from person to person, but they always have one thing in common. They all become excellent, best in class, in fact, mages." "Just mages though?" "Yes, yes. Don't remind me. There hasn't been a warlock in some time. 2,000 years to be precise. Your grandmother from 40 generations ago, in fact." The title of warlock caught Leland's eye. He could see it now, standing before his mother and father as a warlock. Haha, that'd be the day he thought. He would finally demand the respect he thought he deserved. No longer would he be forced to do remedial tasks like runic blending. Ugh, he hated runic blending. What, how would curses differ from normal spells? I am unfamiliar. The crow was silent for a long moment. It only stared at him, almost in disbelief. Curses are generally considered evil or vile, but that is simply not true. A fireball can deal as much damage as ripping the soul from an enemy's body. In fact, pulling souls is much more humane than burning someone alive, in my opinion. Leland squinted. Ahoy! Then there are cantrips. Always fun, those. Someone bothers you, curse them to a sleepless night or copy the voice of their mother and yell at them. Either way, psychological warfare is a hell of a way to battle. Leland squinted more. Then there are rituals. A bit more involved but nothing someone with the gift of magic can't handle. But their niche is few and far between, I'm afraid. Most of your curses will simply harm targets, although they are more useful than just zapping a knoll with lightning. Same outcome, but you'll be safer. Actually, you could even forge a contract with the Lord of Magic and get his blessing. Right, Leland said. I'm not completely sold, however. Like a switch had been flipped, the crow's mirth fell, mimicking the drop of liquid falling from its eye. That's what they all say. My sisters say it's my personality. I'm just too passionate, you know. And Leland did know. He was very passionate about magic, even the tedious part his parents made him study on repeat. Still, he could see a future where he was a warlock. It was a pipe dream, he knew. Becoming a magus was regarded as a life accomplishment, anything past that was a miracle. Still, after today, his life expectancy would significantly elongate. If he chose to become a farmer after this, disregarding a life of magic, he would estimate he'd live another 150 years at least. But if he did choose the path of the warlock, then maybe he'd live for thousands. Thousands of years? Leland asked himself. Yeah, that should be plenty of time. He turned back to the crow. An isolated miniature rain cloud had sprouted above its head, releasing its downpour solely on the bird. The sight made him crack a smile. I've decided, Leland announced. The crow perked up a bit. Do you accept my legacy as the Lord of Curses? Yes, he answered. There was no cheering, there was no hurrah. No falling confetti or blazing trumpets. Only a smirking crow, one with a devilish look, like the face of an actor after the performance of a lifetime. It jumped from its branch, fluttering before Leland. It morphed and mutated, snapping bones and discarding feathers. Dark cloth formed and took, unveiling an elderly human woman with shining grey eyes with sparkling shards of amethyst. Welcome to my coven, Leland Silver, the Lord of Curses spoke. You will not regret your choice. She held a wrinkled hand out, a glob of pure mana formed along her bony palm like a drop of sweat. It glowed somber purple before she abruptly rotated her hand, allowing gravity to take it. The drop landed against the soft soil, falling through the loose grains of dirt. A rumble shook the area, enough to force Leland to his knees. He looked at his lord, wondering what she intended for him. The woman only smirked as the ground parted. Stems and roots poured from the hole, ushering in new life. Grey eyes appeared all around the forest, each staring at their newfound brother. They stood back, allowing the hole to produce all of its wonderment. Eventually the roots and vines stopped and the Lord of Curses stepped forward. She idly reached into the center of the main mass, fishing around for her legacy. With a striking pull, her hand returned holding a grimoire. Gently she passed it to Leland. As soon as he touched the thick book, power and knowledge flowed through him where it eventually fell dormant. His mind closed up, locking his new power under the guise of experience. He smiled, looking over the tome. It was a grimoire, that much was certain. But the runes and glyphs etched around the center cover were unknown to him. A ram skull, sewed with purple felt and golden thread, met his eyes, the hollow sockets staring with anticipation and potential. He felt power from within the book, no from within his book. It was his legacy now, it was his to command. His parents had prepared him for this moment, giving him assignment after assignment about the subjects of the dream ceremony. If he remembered correctly, then all he had to do was. The grimoire popped from reality, disappearing into a newly formed tattoo on the back of his palm. It took the form of a crow in mid-flight. Concentrating, Leland urged the book to reappear in his hands. It did, just how he imagined. He checked, the tattoo was gone as well. He smiled, turning to his lord and sending the grimoire away once again. There would be time to play later. Thank you, Leland said. I can feel the power of your curses. The wrinkled old woman smiled. You mean your curses? Not mine. They are as much yours as mine, I only show you a path forward. She raised her hand. But you will learn in time. It is time for you to return, I only wish to leave you with some parting advice. Leland straightened his posture. Thank you, I'll gladly hear it. Be careful of witch hunters. They should only come after you if you abuse your power. Wait, what? Leland started to panic. What do you mean witch hunters may come for me? I thought they only went after witches. The Lord of Curses smiled solemnly. And those who abuse dark spells. Simply don't, and you will be fine. Leland scratched the back of his neck. All right then. Thanks for the advice. Then the Lord of this realm snapped her fingers, causing Leland's eyes to whip open back in the real world. The first thing he noticed was that the crow tattoo was very much real. The second was that the town's emergency bells were chiming. Underscore 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 un. The Lord of Curses ruefully smiled to herself. She hated lying, especially the theatrics of it all. But still, it had to be done in this case. It wasn't every day she offered her legacy, best to make sure he accept her power. Her gaze fell to the open air. Suddenly a muted pop invaded her domain, summoning forth an older man. They stared at each other for a long moment before the Lord of Curses spoke. Your advice sucked. Try to intimidate. I was losing him until I pulled out the waterworks. The Lord of Magic raised an eyebrow. You cried to a mortal. About how no one accepts my legacy, yes, she said, ignoring the embarrassing connotation. Guilted him into accepting. But he accepted nonetheless. The Curse Lord nodded. A smile sprouted on the Lord of Magic's face. Can't say I'm not disappointed. His parents are two of my favorites. But it's not every day you wish to indoctrinate a new legacy. In fact, I don't even remember the last one. She was about 2,000 years or so ago. That cut the Magic Lord's smile. Ah, right. It really has been a long time. Chapter 3, Legacy of Curses. Ah. Leland blurted, pulling the blanket off his weary form. He quickly threw on trousers and shoes, rushing as if he went too slow, he'd miss it. He paused, however, at the door of his family home. A quick check couldn't hurt, right? His grimoire appeared from the back of his hand, popping into existence already opened to the first page. There, he read the words he had been dying to see since he could remember. Even though he was not the legacy of the Lord he had aspired to be, he could still marvel at this moment. He would cherish it forever. Leland read, along the thick stale pages in deep black ink, his personal information. Name, Leland Silver. Legacy, Curses. Archetype, Initiate of the Curse Lord. Overall rank, 1. Initiate of the Curse Lord, mana costs are significantly lowered for all curses at the expense of the caster's regenerative life force. A bizarre sound formed and flew out of Leland's mouth. It sounded between a startled cat and a giddy child, something that would normally embarrass the young man. But, as long as his parents didn't see, the excitement of finally having a lord trumped any mature countenance he was trying to maintain. Having his life force be used as fuel was a scary thought, however. But then again, any spell played with life force technically. A bolt of lightning could easily be rebounded and kill him, so Leland didn't think that the negative aspect of his archetype would be all that bad. Not when mana costs were significantly lowered. His parents always complained about lack of mana, having the problem somewhat removed seemed like a good trade-off in his eyes. Gently, Leland flipped the page. The pages, for a moment, felt stuck, but with a bit of leverage the next set of words came into view. He gave them a brief glance before trying to skip ahead to the next. The pages didn't budge, in fact, Leland couldn't go beyond page 2. This, while disappointing, was completely normal. The grimoire was a window into his soul, his legacy. It would unlock in time, as his body became more accustomed to the Lord of Curses gift. His frown twisted into a smile when he went over the information on page 2. It was exactly as he was hoping, a spell. And not some boring thing like dust removal or automated sweeping. No, 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 the spell on the second page of Leland's grimoire was a combat spell. His smile only grew as he realized he was one step closer to following his parents into battle. If only they were here with him today. Fracture. Type, Curse. Rank, 1, C. Call upon the Lord of Bone to shatter those in your way. 55% chance to break a random bone in a single target. Leland thought. It wasn't quite what he was expecting. But then again, he had been studying the general path of the Lord of Magic. Of course curses would be different. The dark aspect of the spell scared him a bit though, especially with the Lord of Curses warning about witch hunters. But that was for future Leland to deal with. Right now all he wanted to do was experiment with his new legacy. As Leland exited his home, he quickly saw the potential of his first spell. As his proficiency in the spell became greater, so too would the effects. Maybe, with enough practice, he could break every bone in an enemy's body. That, surely, would make adventuring easy, right? Right now, he had to get to the town's walls, otherwise he'd miss all the action. With his grimoire stashed in his hand tattoo, he took to the streets in a hurry. As he power walked, movement in his periphery pulled his attention. "Oh hey, Glennie," Leland said to the open air. A semi-translucent humanoid shape abruptly stopped, causing Leland to do the same. With a deep sigh,